You have a way with money. Yes, you. You plan for your future every day. Yet, most women don't take an active role in long-term finances. And involvement is only dropping with the next generation. Even though 8 out of 10 women will need to manage their money alone one day. So while women are making strides, now more than ever, why aren't they taking their seat at the money table? You're already there, because if you use money, you understand money. If you can save money, you can invest money. Money can bring freedom to challenge, to change, to choose. And there's nothing more exciting than making your own dream a reality. So make your move. Take action. Big or small, everything counts. Make your money move.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in from wherever you are. This is the UBS Leadership Lunch Series. My name is Shirley Leung. I'm a columnist with the Boston Globe. We are celebrating Women's History Month today by celebrating women entrepreneurs, present and future. And when I say future, I'm hoping what we learn today will inspire some of you to finally launch that business you've always dreamed about. We're going to be in conversation with a triumphant trio today, Donna Levin, Purvi Patodia, and Suzanne Althoff. And their advice comes at a critical time for women. So many women have lost their jobs or dropped out of the workforce during the pandemic. And for some women, entrepreneurship can be a path forward. According to a Deloitte study just released yesterday, we know that women entrepreneurs play an important role in this nation's recovery. They are the fastest growing, highest performing, and most economically underutilized subsegment of entrepreneurs. But before we dive in, we're going to hear remarks from our sponsor, UBS. Here is Carrie Schuffman, Head of Women's Strategy at UBS.
Thank you, Shirley, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much for having me for the UBS Leadership Lunch Series. As Shirley mentioned, my name is Carrie Schuffman, and I'm the head of the Women's Strategic Clients segment at UBS. I'm thrilled to be able to represent UBS and our greater New England UBS market for today's exciting discussion. So you're a woman and want to start a business, here's how. On behalf of UBS, we'd like to thank everyone for joining and thank the Boston Globe for this opportunity to partner to bring these great conversations to life. In my role as the head of the Women's Strategic Clients segment at UBS, my team and I are responsible for the development and implementation of UBS's strategy to address the unique financial needs that women have across their lifetimes. Our goal is to help women navigate their financial futures and prepare across their financial lives, recognizing that all women's stories, backgrounds, and approaches to their financial situations are greatly varied. We do this by providing leading intellectual capital and research, resources, financial education, and supporting content. We're also able to bring to bear the full breadth and capabilities of UBS, the world's largest wealth manager, to truly deliver the firm for women and for all clients, whether it's our best-in-class chief investment office research, our sustainable investing offerings, our family advisory and philanthropy solutions, and so much more. We also partner closely with our business owner strategic client segment to provide business owners and entrepreneurs with the resources and solutions they need to successfully navigate across the life cycle of their business. And that team has also been working tirelessly over the last year to help business owners navigate the COVID-19 pandemic. And speaking of the COVID-19 pandemic, I would be remiss not to mention that there has been tremendous research and weekly headlines highlighting the disproportionate impact that the pandemic has had on women, and in particular on women of color. Shirley mentioned the tremendous effects of COVID in her initial remarks as well. 2 million women have left the labor force in the last year, and in December, women made up all of the net job losses in the US. In a matter of just a few months, the pandemic shattered 30 years of women's progress in the workplace, with women's labor force participation rate at its lowest since 1988. A recent McKinsey study predicts that it may take 2 years longer for women's employment levels, so until 2024, to return to pre-pandemic levels, compared to 2 years or until 2022 for their male counterparts. At UBS, we've also done our own research that has echoed what is being seen nationally. A large majority of women told us that they are taking on more of the household and childcare responsibilities at home, and that they felt that the pandemic has been negatively impacting their careers. Lastly, 80% of women told us through our UBS research that the pandemic has made them want to protect themselves and their families financially more than ever before. And while there will be lasting effects of the pandemic for years to come, our goal at UBS is to indeed help women protect themselves and their families, and to help women navigate the new or next normal that lies ahead. Through our Own Your Worth research and program, our goal is to encourage women to take their seat at the financial table while helping women to achieve greater financial and overall well-being. That may mean pursuing a long-held dream or passion from a career perspective, renegotiating the future return to work or more flexible work arrangements, or starting a business. We know that starting a business is never easy, but women entrepreneurs, and especially women of color, face unique obstacles when launching, funding, and growing their companies. A recent UBS study published just this month titled "The Funding Gap" showed that women entrepreneurs globally receive significantly less funding than their male counterparts, and this reality is even more pronounced for women of color and in developing countries. Yet there is also an abundance of research that suggests that women entrepreneurs perform as well as and even better than their male counterparts. The same UBS report showed that women-led companies generate 78 cents of revenue per dollar on average, compared to only 31 cents for men, and that startups founded by or co-founded by women perform better over time, generating 10% more in cumulative revenue over a 5-year period. At UBS, we seek to support our clients and prospective clients in our communities as they pursue their passions and turn passion into purpose. And in keeping with the topic of passion and purpose and women's entrepreneurship, we are so excited to sponsor today's incredible event with such a dynamic group of inspiring leading women to celebrate Women's History Month and continue these important conversations. So with that, again, I'd like to thank the Boston Globe for their partnership, and Shirley, I'll turn it back to you to kick off the panel. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you, UBS. I mean, those were some sobering statistics that you just mentioned, but also hopeful. So today we're going to kick it off. We're going to do things a little bit differently. During the first half, I'm going to be interviewing the panelists separately because each has a different, unique story to tell, and then everybody will come together at the end in the second half of the panel and answering questions from the audience and a few more questions from me. We have received some great pre-submitted questions. I get a sense we have quite a few aspiring entrepreneurs tuning in today. And if anyone in the audience wants to ask a question during the webinar, please use your Q&A function during the Zoom. The chat function has been turned off. So first up, I'm going to welcome Donna Levin. Hopefully Donna can turn on her camera. I think it's coming on. Hi, Donna. And you're unmuted. Good job. So hi, Donna. So Donna is a co-founder of Care.com, one of the world's biggest online marketplaces for finding and managing family care. I have used Care.com for many years when my kids were little. She is now teaching entrepreneurship, first in MIT and Worcester Polytechnic Institute, and currently runs the Author Blank School for Entrepreneurial Leadership at Babson College. So Donna, I want to begin with your origin story and Care.com's origin story. So tell us how you helped launch it.
Absolutely. So I loved that notion about passion and purpose. It really made me think about how we got started at Care.com. All of the co-founders at Care.com, we were at another company called You Promise that helped people save money for college through their everyday spending. And we all had our caregiving challenges. One of my co-founders, Sheila Marcello, she had 2 kids who were pretty young, and her parents came to help her while she was at You Promise. Her dad had a heart attack, and she was very quickly found herself in this sandwich generation. And you promised we were tracking all of this data from your groceries to your gas to your mortgage. And still, she was using resources like her local library and like putting a card up to try and find caregiving for her family, and thought, something's wrong here. Fast forward, while at You Promise, I had my first child, who was like my 5-year project. Ended up on bed rest. So I had a solid plan. I think Sheila threw me a baby shower when I was still like at 22 weeks. So there was like a really tight plan. I knew where my child was going to daycare. It was all locked down. And at 11 weeks, my son had a seizure-like episode. And daycare was not an option. I remember sitting in Children's Hospital with my husband, who's a therapist, and hearing that like the results were inconclusive. We were going to have to monitor our child pretty much like after every meal, and had to sit up, and like we're listening to this long list. And we just sat there thinking, like, what are we going to do? We became 2 ships passing in the night because my husband changed his schedule. He was home during the day and I was working, and then he would go at night and then I would be home. And we did this for 3 years until we found out what was going on with my son's health. I saw the challenges with members of our team around senior care. So fast forward, You Promise is acquired. Sheila's at a VC firm looking at all of these different ideas. And it was more of like, what if we could do something about this one? Because this is an ongoing challenge. It is massive, is global. It impacts so many, we call sort of those chief household officers, which before the pandemic, we knew they were women. And I think we're definitely seeing them now who are making all of these decisions. And that was really the start of CARE. We, sort of the vision was like we were going to go acquire these companies and bring them all together because it was so fragmented. You can imagine the conversations going into someone who had a thriving business and saying, hey, we'd like to buy your business and run it. And they're like, have you run a business before? But the answer being no one wanted to sell a business to any of us. And so our first investors, Matrix Partners, said, well, you got a team already. They've been at other startups. Why don't you guys just go build it? And that was the start of care.com.
That's an incredible story. And how old is your son now?
So my son, his health is so much better. He is 18.
Wow.
And he will be heading off to college in the fall, and he cannot wait.
Wow. So in building care.com, I believe you launched it in 2007. Was there a moment when you thought to yourself, holy cow, we're onto something and this company is going to take off?
So I thought about that, and there were so many moments, and that entrepreneurial journey is full of these ups and downs. So clearly when we secured our first funds and set up our office, we believed in that vision, like it is going to take off. And then we opened shop and nothing happened. So that was sort of one of those lows, and we had a team of moms who would, sort of look at anyone who was coming into our community. And I remember the first time I got a call in the middle of the night that said like, hey, we're so far behind. We have like 8,000 families in queue. And it was thought like, wow, okay, maybe we're onto something, that we have this high demand. But it was more so as we started to grow, we had a very complicated scheme of we're going to go 10 metros at a time. When someone said, hey, is anyone trying to grow in Hawaii? Because we have members in Hawaii. We very quickly realized, because we were online, that it was national and it was moving much faster than we thought. And I think the moment where we started getting a ton of inbounds from people who had used our service saying, hey, I used your service, but I also have a special needs child. And here's how I used your service, but it'd be really helpful if you could go deeper in special needs, or if you could go deeper in senior care. And very quickly looking at those numbers, we realized we could be really big. And I remember a board meeting, sitting there with our investors, and we just all sort of had this moment of looking at the numbers, pulling back and reassessing the market. And that conversation was like, how much faster can you guys move? because, you know, you need to get international faster.
Mhm. That's incredible. So in recent years, you've transitioned into academia. And so when you look at this generation of aspiring women entrepreneurs, what kind of companies are they launching?
So, you know, I was thinking about this and look back. They're swinging big. It is all about impact. And if you can think it, they're doing that. So from sort of those massively scalable companies of thinking about, you know, everything from fast fashion, ed tech, robotics, and how that's sort of improving a society to people also thinking hyper local about what impacts means to them of I want to go into this community, or combining that passion and purpose. You know, someone who traveled with their parents early on, you know, has another company, you know, set out to end child marriage. It is the full spectrum of people who are really working hard to figure out how am I bringing my big idea to life, and there are a ton of resources to help them.
Mhm. I mean, it's only, been 14 or 15 years since
Yeah.
you launched Care, helped launch Care, but um, do you think it's harder or easier for a woman to launch a business today versus what you did 14 years ago?
I think it's a yes and so here are the things that give me hope and why I think it's easier. The cost of technology is so incredibly low. I was speaking to a pair of female founders last night who are creating this community for female cancer survivors. And to test this, I was like, guys, you need $100. Do you have $100? Because with that $100, you could stand up a site, you could start testing your messaging, and you could have your MVP. That was unheard of, 15 years or so ago. It took us $4 million to sort of get our infrastructure in sight. And now there's so many platforms that you can actually build your business on top of. I say it's an and for all of those statistics that we started off with, of that, yes, the path can still be challenging, but there are a number of resources out there to support.
Mhm. That's great. Donna, thank you for your reflections. We are going to see you later, and I'm going to welcome our next panelist right now. Let's see if I can see her on my screen. Purvi Padodia. Where's Purvi? She's going to pop up. There you are.
Hey there.
Hi.
How are you?
Welcome. So
Thanks
I just
for having me.
I got to find you on my screen now. So anyways,
Okay.
so Purvi, you've done a lot of things, right? And you're the founder of Vienna Snacks, and and you've been called the chickpea chick, right? And so what's
Yeah.
the origin story of Vienna Snacks?
Yeah, sure. So, and for those that are in the audience and may not have come across Vienna, so we are a healthy snack brand. We have distribution in about 15,000 stores around the country, from Whole Foods to Target to Walmart to the local Hudson News in the airport. And we have two product lines. We have a line of roasted chickpea snacks, and then we also have a line of puffs that are just, both of them are better for you snacking option versus the average everyday standard snacks that are out there. So, and initially I started the company really to solve a problem for myself, which is that I happened to be pregnant when I had the idea for the brand, and I was eating a lot, snacking a lot, and I was trying to eat healthier and better foods. And I realized that I was eating all these natural products, natural snacks or organic snacks, but when I looked at the nutrition label, nutritionally, there was actually nothing actually there. And I kind of had this thought, like, why is it that the best that we can do with snacks is that, that there's no artificial ingredients, but nutritionally it's still just empty calories or empty carbs. And in that moment, I thought of this snack that I ate growing up, which was basically a roasted chickpea, a whole bean that is crispy and crunchy and I kind of had this thought, like, I wonder if there's something I can do with that. And so that's what got me intrigued and made me feel like, maybe there's a market here. And that's how I kind of jumped into it. I started, now professionally, my background is in consumer products. I happen to be the brand manager of a major brand at the time. And so I did have that background in brand, which was really helpful. But by the way, it turns out that once I made the jump and started this company, I can tell you that basically much of that background did not help me at all for the first couple of years, because when you're starting from scratch and doing everything, building a brand from scratch, you don't learn those things working on really big brands. So, and the mission of the brand is all about offering the everyday consumer something that's a much healthier alternative to what you're eating today. And just the stats around snacking are incredible in the sense that 10 years ago, the average consumer was eating 1 to 2 snacks a day. And today, the average consumer is eating 3+ snacks throughout the day. And we're a society where we've moved away from eating 3 square meals a day. And instead, we're kind of grazing throughout the day and eating smaller meals and looking to snacking to really fill that nutritional portion of your life. And so, that's the mission, and that's how we got started.
Yeah. Now, you haven't always been in the food industry. I mean, you were in sales and marketing on the side of the software side. You were actually selling software to Fortune 500 companies. So how did you make that transition? And was the end goal always, I'm going to start a company?
No, in the sense that, it is, when I think back and when I reflect on my journey, I mean, actually, I realized that I was dreaming of like food ideas from the time that I was a teenager, but it was typically around restaurants and things like that. And that was because that was just really all that I knew about related to the food industry. But coming out of undergrad, I actually, as you said, started my career in software. And the way that I came across consumer products was that one of the software companies I was working for, we were selling our software to large consumer products companies. And so being on the sales and marketing side of that, I was kind of looking into learning about the consumer products industry so we could sell our products to them. And that's when I discovered this role of brand management and brand marketing. And I was like, wow, this is so cool, because I thought I learned it was all about selling physical products to consumers that you can eat and see and feel, that are more tangible. And I just became really fascinated with, why people buy and what motivates people. And, I've always loved food, not only because it nourishes your body, but also because it brings people together. So I started by just really talking to people in the food industry that were doing the job that I thought was that I wanted, and asking them about their paths. And I learned that in order to pursue that, I had to go back to business school. And in order to kind of make that change, that big kind of career change from one industry to another. And so I went back to business school. I was at Duke. And I was very focused on making this kind of change. I had an internship at Procter & Gamble, where I worked in the fabric care division in their international group. I absolutely loved it, and basically kind of started my career there in consumer products. So.
That's great. So I asked Donna the same question earlier, which is, was there a moment for you when you thought, I'm really onto something with Vienna snacks, and this is really going to take off?
Yeah. I think for me, there were probably different moments at different stages in the journey. And so probably there's, we have 2 major stakeholders. Ultimately, the most important stakeholder is the consumer, right? And it's everyday people who are, we sell millions of bags of snacks a year, and these are being purchased by millions of people. And so at the end of the day, that's who we really care about. And so I kind of learned early on that there was something here. And that's because I was the first set of stores that I got the brand into. The first one was a Whole Foods outside of Boston in Hingham, Mass. And I also happened in that year one, also got the brand into a couple of local independent stores as well in the Boston area. And I was doing everything myself at the time. Like I would literally show up, to the store with a demo table and sample the products myself, because I felt like it was really, really important for me to be able to hear what people were saying about the snacks as they were trying it, because this was something totally new. So I think in that first year, I got that initial kind of moment, like, wow, I created something from scratch. I'm literally selling it at Whole Foods, and now people are trying it and they seem to be loving it. And I was getting really positive feedback from the stores where we were selling. So that was, the first aha moment. And then I think the next one came a couple of years later when we got our first major national distribution deal with Target. And that was really meaningful to just know that, a major retailer is jumping into this as well. So
that's great. So the last time I talked to you was August 2019, and and I asked you, I was interviewing about whether or not you thought a recession was on the horizon, and
right.
turns out I asked you the absolutely wrong question. I should have asked you, do you see a pandemic on the radar? Right?
Oh my God.
So just briefly,
crazy.
what has it been like steering Vienna Snacks through a pandemic? What has the impact been on everything from supply chain to your sales? I mean, you said people are snacking like 3 times a day. I think during the pandemic, people were snacking like 6 times a day.
No, I mean, we have been, I've been so grateful that we have a positive role to play, because our snacks, people also gravitated towards comfort. And I don't know if you saw the stories about people just literally wanting to eat the things that they grew up with. And so, our strategy has always been about like giving people the familiar flavors that they want from snacks, which is why we have flavors like barbecue and honey roasted and sea salt. And so, but we're doing it in a more modern and nutritious way. And so I've been just so thankful that we have a positive role to play as people are feeling uncomfortable or they're, having anxiety or difficulty, that there's kind of a positive snack that they can turn to. And, in terms of our experience during the pandemic, like many other companies and industries, it's been absolutely crazy. And, I think back to this Darwin quote where he said, it's not the strongest that survive, but the ones that are the most adaptable. And I think that was really, if I had one statement to sum up our experience, and how we navigated through the pandemic, it's just the fact that, yes, people were gravitating towards our snacks, but what really, really changed was consumer shopping habits and consumer shopping behavior. And partially because they were just responding to the policies of the retailers and policies of the government, but also because of ease and convenience and accessibility, where, e-commerce became, and buying things online, getting them delivered to your home became, something that was accelerated by 5, 6, 10 years. And so we just had to, we pivoted as quickly as we could and as fast as we could to adapt to how our consumers were buying, so that we were available and accessible in all the places that, that people want to buy. So
that's great. Well, thank you, Porvi. You made me hungry. Hungry for Vienna snacks. So
that's awesome.
Anyways, we will see you later. And next up is Suzanne Althoff. So Suzanne is assistant professor of publishing at Emerson College. Hi, Suzanne. And she and I used to be colleagues at the Globe. She had spent a long time in journalism, including a long stint as the editor of the Boston Globe magazine. That's where we got to know each other. And her first book, Launching Well Female, Smashing the System That Holds Women Entrepreneurs Back, was released in October. So Suzanne, so what made you write this book?
Hi, Shirley. Thanks for including me. Yeah, so the book sprang, it actually originally started from my experience at the Boston Globe. While I was at the Globe, I was really fortunate to work on a few product launches, and that really got me hooked on the idea of entrepreneurial work. And then when I transitioned to become a professor, I began advising students who were launching companies while they were still in school. And it just happened that everyone that I was advising was a woman. And I began, they came into my office looking for advice, and I heard over and over again stories about investors not taking them seriously or belittling their ideas. I heard about their struggles to get the startup capital that they needed, to build prototypes and just to grow. And I began researching in depth the statistics about the gender gap in entrepreneurship, that women launch fewer companies than men. Their companies overall make less revenue and employ fewer people. For example, women-founded startups receive less than 3% of the venture capital in the United States. And the amount is even lower for women who are Black or Latinx. So I like so many people, this data I found really frustrating, but at the same time, I knew that there are women entrepreneurs who create really successful, amazing companies. Donna and Porvi gave us two incredible examples of this. So the book came about because I wanted to use my journalism skills to interview over 100 women and non-binary entrepreneurs. And I wanted to hear from them directly. What would it take for us to ease entrepreneurship's gender gap? And so my book collects their stories and lays out things that all of us should do. It's not on the shoulders of entrepreneurs to fix this gap. We all need to play a role.
And during these interviews, was there a defining quality that all these women entrepreneurs and non-binary entrepreneurs had, something that might explain why they were successful at starting a company?
Absolutely. There were some commonalities. So I interviewed women all over the country in multiple industries. All of them showed a natural curiosity. And I would also say they were all impatient and an impatient in a good way. Like they saw a problem or they saw a need and they said, I'm going to address this. I'm going to fix this. They didn't say, I sure hope someone else looks into this. They said, I'm going to take ownership of this problem. I also was struck by the number of people that I interviewed who told me that they want to start a really successful company and make it financially successful, but they want to do good in the world. And they talked a lot about this idea of, I want to lift up my community. I want to pay fair wages. I want to create work that can be balanced with life, home life. So that is really exciting. And I want to say a bit more about this idea of, we've heard now several, both Donna and Porvi talked about, I saw an unmet need and I started a company to address that. And I think that really gets to the heart of a question that I often get asked is, why do we need more women entrepreneurs in our country? Or why do we need more entrepreneurs of color? And I think if you begin to think about this unmet need as driving a lot of these new businesses, for us to have a rich diversity of companies and diversity of products and services, we need to have entrepreneurs with different backgrounds, different experiences, coming from different communities. And researchers have shown that we're missing out on a stronger economy and more jobs when we don't have full entrepreneurial participation. And we've heard the statistics at the start of this talk that we're going to need a lot of entrepreneurs at work to get out of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. So in this book, you write that women don't have the same level of confidence as men when it comes to launching companies. But obviously you found plenty of women who have ignored that little voice in their head, right? How did these women overcome that feeling of, I can't do this?
Yes, over and over again, a lot of them told me that they planned on hearing no. Like they said, I'm going to hear no, and I'm going to be ready for it. So for example, they said, when I approached my first investor, I already had in my mind, okay, this will be the second investor I approach, and then the third, and then the fourth, and the fifth, so that if that first investor said, no, I don't see the idea, or I don't think it has potential, they said, okay, I'm ready to go to the second. And also they derived their strength and they built their confidence from their customers. And they heard from customers often, customers saying, why didn't anyone else start something like this? Or I can't live without this. So even though they were hearing no and they had their own self-doubt, that the customers really began propelling their journey. So, and that's why I think all entrepreneurs, I know we have a lot of people in the audience who want to start their own businesses. Get in front of your customers as soon as you can, talk to them, respond to them, and they will help you keep going.
Great, Suzanne. I'm going to welcome back Donna and Porvi. So turn on your cameras. And reminder to everyone tuning in, you can ask questions via the Q&A function. Let's see, do I have Porvi too? Oh, Porvi's coming. Porvi will be, hello. I think everybody's here now. Great. So I wanted to start out with some of the pre-submitted questions, and a lot of them centered around nitty-gritty of starting a business. And so one of the first questions is, where can I get help to move forward beyond the idea phase?
I'd love to jump in there. And so when I think about sort of moving forward, I think that, yes, you need the funding, but before you get to the funding, everybody's going to want to know more about your idea and your vision. And there are some great programs, especially now that the world is flat. So I assume that most of you are probably in the Massachusetts area. And so, everything from maybe taking a look at the Center for Women in Enterprise, going to maybe a female founders night, virtually, either through the Venture Cafe or MASH Challenge, taking a look at some of the programming offered from E4All. We talked about women of color, particularly Black entrepreneurs, and that road. We have a great program called Be Well, which is for the Black women's entrepreneurial leadership. And it's a cohort that comes together from all across the nation, because there are unique challenges that we all face as we go to try and build our company. And it's definitely great to have a network that can share a lot of those resources. There are programs like the Women's Leadership Academy for women in high school. There are a number of resources, and happy to send them off to get you from, okay, where am I going with my idea and how am I creating that vision? And then when you start to get to funding, I will tell you, Google really is your friend. There are a ton of grants now focused on funds for women. There's grantsforwomen.org, 37 Angels. Think of your big organizations who are trying to go into this space. They have a program that's offering grants. Grants.gov. There are a lot of great places to go as you start to sort of put these pieces together and recognize that, yes, there's a steep hill and the road's longer, but it can definitely be done.
Sorry, I don't know if you guys can hear me. I have no video now.
We can hear you, Shirley.
You can hear me great.
Yes.
Better to hear me than see me. So, did you guys talk about grants? Are there grants to help women start businesses? So, okay, Donna, good.
Yeah. So I only gave sort of a snippet.
Right.
But if you go and look, just search for funds for women or grants for women, and multiple articles will come up with some of those ideas, and see if there's one that's a fit for you. And I would also encourage you before that, funding is to enable your strategy, to really pull back and think about the kind of business that you want. For you, this is the time that you get to be the center of the universe. I've been told, all through my childhood, you're not the center. When it comes to your business, you are the center of the universe. Mm-hmm. So start to think about what kind of business do you want to have? And that really will dictate sort of your next steps, and then how you want to think about funding it.
And on my website, I have about 100 resources for women entrepreneurs, grants, fellowships. And Donna is right. There is a lot out there, which is great.
And another question that came up is, once you start a business, how do you accelerate growth? Who wants to take that on?
I'm happy to jump in. I think that the biggest thing is really understanding, as Suzanne was talking about, understanding your customer, right? And I think everything starts with that, whether it's you're going out to raise money, whether you're building your business plan, whether you're thinking about growth, particularly if you're thinking about growth, it starts with understanding what is the pain point and the problem you're trying to solve, and who is the customer, and how do you define this customer if you were to try to identify them. And then if you can really, even if you're not fully sure, but if you can write out the hypotheses or the assumptions that you're making around that, then you can really think about where are they buying today, right? Or what are the channels, or on what platforms are these customers at today? Because then you can define what your growth strategy is, and really build out your assumptions of what is it going to take to make this customer aware of my service or my product, and what is it going to take for them to really convert. And then ultimately, and most importantly in consumer products, it's that repeat rate, right? And so how satisfied are they, and are they going to come back? And so I think that's really I think those are some of the core principles behind any kind of growth strategy. I don't know what else you guys would add, Donna and Suzanne.
I'll jump in. No, I'm right there with you. When it comes to growth, I definitely don't think it's a one size fits all solution when you're thinking about the growth. But I do think if you go sort of into your unit economics, or I think about this as sort of your bucket, if I put, $1 into my bucket, does a penny come out on the other side, or does nothing come out on the other side? And I always talk about it of, you're ready to scale when you have started to close those holes in your bucket. So when you put sort of $1 in your business, at least $1 is coming out the other side. And when you put $1 in your business and $3 starts coming out the other side, this possibility of growth looks really interesting. But to try and sort of pull back and make sure, before you pour the gas on, you really have those numbers figured out.
There's another live question here about barriers women face. I mean, what are the main barriers women face? Are there common themes? Suzanne, maybe you since you talked to 100 entrepreneurs, maybe you could start us off.
Yes, access to the money that they need to start and grow their company is a constant barrier for women, and we see this in a multiple of ways. The gender pay gap contributes to this because, as Purvi talked about, a lot of women entrepreneurs work in industry for a decade or so before they launch their company. So if the pay gap comes in place there, the racial pay gap as well, the racial wealth gap comes into play. There's so much advice out there, and it is good advice to turn to friends and family for the early money that you need, but that of course assumes that you have friends and family who have money to give, and that's just not possible. Student debt plays a role in this as well. Researchers have found that people who have significant student debt are less likely to start a company, or when they do start a company, their companies are slower to grow. So money is one. Role models and mentors and sponsors is another group. Researchers have done interesting studies about sponsors. These are the people who take a more active role than mentors. They make introductions, they bring you into an important meeting. Sponsors have what researchers call a mini-me syndrome. They pretend to sponsor people or proteges who have their same gender or race. And because so much of the business world today is still dominated by white men, a white male CEO maybe it appears is more likely to sponsor a young white man who reminds him of himself. So we need to encourage everyone to be mentors and sponsors and to build more role models. Confidence, I spoke about, that's another common barrier. Microaggressions is a significant barrier. And researchers have done studies on this. For example, the questions that women entrepreneurs are asked by investors as opposed to the questions male entrepreneurs are asked. Women entrepreneurs are often asked risk questions or safety questions, like how will you handle a loss of money? Whereas male entrepreneurs are asked about growth potential, how big will you grow? And interestingly, both male and female investors ask these questions. We're all socialized the same way with the same expectations of who is the ideal leader and who is the ideal innovator. So those are some of the biggest hurdles.
Can I add to that? I agree 100% with every single one of those barriers. And I'm sure I ran into some of them today. That I think it's really important that knowing about those barriers, that you start to figure out how you're going to overcome those barriers. So definitely read the book and get the list. But like a common tactic is when people are starting to talk about sort of the risk, you just flip the conversation and talk about the massive opportunity and the scale, and get them back on track to sort of where you want to go. There's some barriers that just take longer. I think about, there's a great case study on Mented, which is a female-led venture cosmetics company for women of color, 2 HBSers, Wall Street background. They had a really hard time. And so we always tell people with these scalable businesses that, you should raise money for 18 months and, this is how you do it. That didn't follow suit for them. And so, yes, they did have to keep their day jobs because they knew what numbers they needed to make work. They spent many more nights and weekends to sort of get there, and they had a much longer time to getting to that initial capital raise, but it can get done.
Porby, you got anything for me?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, and yeah, I mean, I agree with all of the things that you guys said, and I saw many of those things in my journey as well. And just to kind of add to this, and we were talking about this last week as a group. I think when I have to really think about what is a key barrier that I face, I think early on it's just lack of credibility. I think somehow and for some reason, women start out having to prove themselves, start out kind of in a negative place where I think, and obviously it's hard to generalize, but I think there are situations where if I was the same person, but as a man presenting an idea, I would have just started out with more credibility. And Donna, to your point on, let's not just recognize those challenges, but let's talk about and let's think about how we're going to overcome them. And I think the way to overcome that lack of credibility is to really come prepared as much as you can and armed with as much data as you can. And so whether that's data about your consumer that really validates your concept, your idea, your path to market, your growth strategy, or whether that's, so consumer data, industry data, category data, warm introductions, if it's about an investor, warm introductions from mentors or even others that you know in the industry, pretty much anything that you can do to establish that you have credibility and that way you're kind of pre-selling yourself. You want to pre-sell yourself as much as you can before you even do the sell, whether that's in a buyer's office or in an investor, in an investor conversation.
We have another great question from the live audience here, along the theme of getting women back to work. And are there resources for low-income women who want to go back to work? Childcare is always an issue, but it's important that women can jump back into careers instead of just taking jobs, hourly jobs. I don't know if you guys have one of you have some advice on that.
Yeah, I'll go in. That's really a tough one because childcare is definitely one of those challenges, and particularly during a pandemic, where it's really hard to necessarily say leave your child with a friend. So, I'm so hopeful of where we're going with vaccinations. to get to that point where you can trust, and with the weather getting warmer, that your child has an option of being in a safe environment with someone else while you're on this path. I would definitely look at some of the resources from the Department of Labor and what's going on in sort of your local and your state, and start to think about the places where you want to be. So many companies right now, they're not talking about it. Almost every founder I talk to, and it's like, how are you during the pandemic? And they're like, I don't want to say it, but we're up by 40%. You know, people aren't waving like flags right now going, wow, for some reason, business was really good during the pandemic, but they're all starting to think about the return to work and when are they opening up those new positions. So if there's some place that you think you might want to work, reach out about an exploratory interview, take a look at LinkedIn and see if there's someone you know who's there who probably knows, like, yeah, we have like 50 recs that we're going to start to slowly release. And I would also encourage you to think about that the world really is flat now. So many employers are thinking, hey, I can hire someone anywhere now. And so you don't only have to look for opportunities in the state where you currently reside as you think about what that return might be. People really are doing the whole interview process. So I'm new to the Babson community. And my entire probably year-long interview process was done all online.
Wow.
Anna, you make a great point, and related to remote a lot, if the jobs are done from home, which, you know, helps a bit with childcare. Yeah. I recognize personally that working at home with a child nearby is hard, but that can make a difference. There's a necessity entrepreneurship is something that a lot of researchers talk about, which is the opposite of opportunity entrepreneurship. Necessity entrepreneurship is you start a company because you're unemployed or you are underemployed. So for this person asking this question, you know, perhaps this is the push to push you into starting your own business. Especially, I think so many women right now are seeing needs in education delivery, healthcare needs. We're seeing, you know, grocery shopping. The pandemic has exposed for us a lot of company ideas, places where we need still innovation. So my hope is that a lot of women entrepreneurs will pick up on these ideas and run with them.
Great. So we have 8 minutes left, not a lot of time. So, so I'm going to try to squeeze in maybe 2 more questions. So this is a really good question. And one of you can answer. So what is the baseline fiscal responsibility that falls on the entrepreneur? In other words, with women making 2/3 less than men, what do we need to have to start with before we can quit our day job? You know, how do you decide what your baseline is and what's your support system?
I'll jump in there. Frequently we have people go through sort of this whole guide, one for yourself and one for anyone else that you're thinking about starting a business with. And one of those first questions that you have to ask yourself is, how much money do I need to survive? And what does survive mean for me? Does that mean that I can just pay all my bills, or I can pay all my bills and then still take a vacation on the Cape? But be really honest with yourself about how much money you need to survive, and what that might look over time. What kind of supports do you need for yourself or for your family? I think this is going back to the center of the universe, like all of that stuff comes to play. And so the number is different from everyone on how much money you're actually going to need before you can make that switch. And honestly, based on the business that you're building, if you need to make that switch. And so, you know, there are some companies, if you're thinking about, I'm going to create, you know, either a lifestyle business or one because, you know, I'm unemployed right now and I'm thinking, what is it that I can do? And you create something that might always be your side hustle. In addition to whatever day job you have in the future. And that's great. You may be looking at something going on Main Street in your community and saying, hey, there's a space there that's missing. And wouldn't it be great when we open up if we had, a bookshop, I don't know, a popcorn stand. I'm obsessed with popcorn. Sort of this whole long list of things that you might be able to do, but you're going to have to figure out that notion for yourself. But I think for any entrepreneur, your number one thing is not to run out of cash.
Great. So last question here before I hand it back to Carrie. So no doubt you've all inspired women on this call, some women to say like, I'm gonna finally launch my company. And so if you had to give that person who's thinking, I'm gonna log off and I'm really gonna do this, what is one piece of advice? And it could be anything, a number of things. I mean, I know that Suzanne touched on dealing with the word no. I mean, I don't know if it's advice on how to overcome someone constantly saying no. Porvi, do you want to start us off?
So the question is advice on overcoming no?
Overcoming no, or any, or that, or what's if you want to start a business once you log off, what's the first thing you should do? Okay, your choice.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think on the no part, I think I love to say with our team, no just means not right now, but also to listen and to take into account, really listen to understand what the objection is so that you can be very considerate about it and incorporate it into your plan as to how you're going to overcome it. But in terms of what's the one thing, I think the one thing could be either to talk to customers to validate your idea. Potential customers, you could start out, of course, with friends and family if that feels a little bit less scary. But the other one thing could be simply creating a very actionable list for yourself. And I think the key word here is actionable. Keep it as simple as it gets, because of course, you can also easily get caught up in tons and tons of planning or analysis paralysis. But very simple, actionable list for yourself of what am I going to do in the next 7 days or 5 days to move this idea forward, and then to hold yourself accountable to it.
Nice. I would add, if you are currently thinking, I really want to start a business, and you're wondering, I will tell you, you're ready. You attended this, you've been thinking about it. Don't do the analysis paralysis. You only get the data through doing it. Just go ahead and do it. I don't consider myself sort of a big risk taker. People like, you take so many risks. Here's how I think about starting a business. You can always get a job. So, and based on your experience with your business, you're going to have so much more to offer if you decide like this isn't for me, for an employer, and you may surprise yourself and create something that is fantastic, that's great for you, for your family, and creates generational wealth. So I say you're ready and to go for it. There are a ton of resources and a whole community here ready to help you.
I would say surround yourself by a community of entrepreneurs, not only for the advice that you will receive and the support, but to lift each other up, buy from each other's companies, promote each other's companies on social media. That's something that I tell everybody. Who is the CEO and the company owner of the businesses that you spend most of your money on? And are you satisfied when you find out the answer? And if you're not satisfied, then ask yourself, which entrepreneurs can I lift up in my community? Mm-hmm. And if you yourself are an entrepreneur, that lifting up will help your boat as well.
Well, thank you, Porvi Patodia, the founder of Vienna Snacks. I know I can find your snacks in my local Star Market. Thank you, Suzanne Altoff, the author of Launching While Female. You can buy her book on Amazon, right? And anyway, go check out our website, and hopefully she'll share us the tips. And Donna, Professor Levin, thank you so much for teaching the next generation of female entrepreneurs. And I'm going to hand this back to Carrie Schuffman.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, everyone. What a terrific and inspiring discussion. Thank you to Shirley for leading today's discussion. And thank you to our fantastic panelists, Suzanne Altoff, Donna Levin, and Purvi Patodia for sharing your stories, advice, and insights with us. On behalf of UBS and the UBS Greater New England Market, thank you to the Boston Globe for including us in this important conversation. And we're proud to support the UBS Leadership Lunch Series. I'm sure I speak for everyone tuning in when I say that I learned, and I'm sure everyone learned so much from today's conversation. Donna, your comments around the path being challenging for women entrepreneurs and your emphasis on the importance of finding the ways to get the resources and the support that you may need as an entrepreneur was really terrific advice. Purvi, you really hit on such an important point around the concept of adaptability and the need for businesses to be adaptable throughout the course of the pandemic and beyond so that they can not only survive, but thrive. And lastly, Suzanne, thank you for sharing your insights from your book and what you've learned from the women entrepreneurs you've studied about their success, as well as the barriers that they've overcome, and for your critical comments on the need as a society to have rich diversity of companies with entrepreneurs of all different backgrounds and experience coming from different communities so that we can truly achieve full entrepreneurial participation. We know through our research that companies led by diverse entrepreneurs meet or exceed average returns. Our recent UBS white paper on women's entrepreneurship that I mentioned in my opening remarks also cited that if women and men were to participate equally as entrepreneurs, global GDP could rise by 3 to 6%, boosting the world economy by up to $5 trillion with a T, trillion dollars. And according to a recent study of 300 companies, investments in companies with at least one female founder outperformed investments in all male founder teams by 63%. As we close out today's discussion, I want to highlight the ending of the recent white paper that addresses ways we can support women entrepreneurs, including through funding and support, networking, eliminating biases, and overcoming the existing barriers that we've discussed today. Interestingly enough, the recent report closes by saying that media coverage plays an important role in showcasing successful business ventures, in particular when female entrepreneurs are able to inspire other women to embark on the entrepreneurial journey and who help other women believe in their own potential. Through today's conversation, I think Suzanne, Donna, Purvi, and Shirley, you have done exactly that. So with that, I will close. And again, on behalf of UBS, thank you to the Boston Globe and to everyone who joined us today, including UBS clients and prospective clients, UBS employees, friends and family, and the entire Boston Globe community joining us today. If you'd like to learn more about all of the work UBS is doing focused on women and women's financial well-being, you can visit ubs.com/women to learn more. Thank you again, be well, and take care.